Hey everyone, and welcome to the video on the best build you can possibly use for Technomancer right now. This build may change in the future, and at the moment I'm using this build on tier 11s and 12. I'll make an update video on tier challenge 15 when I get to that stage. But this is my second character, so it may take a few days. The first thing we're going to talk about with this really powerful toxic build is the skill tree. The skill tree, we have increased weapon damage by 8%. We have reduced decay skills cooldown, which is what we're going to be using for this build. We're going to keep using those toxic bullets and the blighted turret. We have increased armor piercing by 10%, just so we do a bit more damage. Increase your critical damage by 15%, so we're always going to keep going for those crits to get the most damage we can. We have exposing toxin, which is every time toxic is afflicted on an enemy, vulnerable status is also afflicted. So we are just doing insane amounts of damage because we've hit them with toxic, for the bonus damage, and they're vulnerable. Vulnerable afflicted on an enemy is 40% more effective, so we're inflicting vulnerable, and it's also 40% more powerful. I've also put anomalous body on here as well, which has increased max health by 10%. On this build we have like a throwaway point, so I just went for more health because this build can get shredded very easily, but the amount of damage it deals out is definitely worth it. We also have decreased the distance considered to be long range by 3 meters. We then have more weapon damage by 8%. We then have decreased the distance considered to be long range again, so that we can be more aggressive and get that long range bonus we get for being a Technomancer. We also have enemies afflicted with toxic receive 10% more damage. So when we're using our blighted turret and our blighted rounds, we're just doing so much damage every time we use it. We have the weapon damage by 8% again. I've gone for the increase your assault weapon damage by 20% and your drop chance by 20%. This is because the tactical rifles, the burst ones, are the best things to use for this build because they have the least damage drop and they're just insane damage wise. We have increased your assault weapon damage by 12%, so we've got loads more damage whenever we're using the assault rifles. We have increased your armor piercing again, just because we sort of have to choose that point and it gives us a bit more damage. And then we've got this one, two sides of the power. Increased damage received from all sources by 15%, but you deal 20% more damage. So we're taking a lot more damage, but we're dealing so much more damage in the process. So this is sort of a glass cannony build. We also have increased your long range weapon damage by 30%, so that's why we're using the decreased distance to be long range, because then we can also use that and we're hitting the long range multipliers more. We also have magazine size by 50%. This is helpful for our blighted rounds because it will last for 2 magazines, and we want those magazines to last as long as possible. We also have enemies afflicted with toxic receive 15% more damage, which is very helpful because we're giving toxic to everything. And then last we have activating decay increases weapon damage for you and your allies by 40%. So we're going to constantly be using our blighted turret to get that 40% every 10 seconds. And the recharge of it is 5 seconds, so every time we throw it and it recharges, we throw it again. And we constantly just have 40% more weapon damage the whole time. That's the skill tree. Now let's look at the gear and weapons. Next up is the weapons and gear. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the weapon. I only use one weapon in this build. I don't have a secondary weapon that I use. It's just any gun in that slot. So my weapon that I use is a tactical assault rifle. This weapon I want to try and find crit damage, long range damage and close range damage on it. That way we're just dealing as much damage as we can with it. We're also looking for just any good mod on it, because the mod we want to use is bone shrapnel. So if you can get a good mod on one and then attach bone shrapnel as well, you'll do perfect. I would recommend lightning strike or anything like that. For me, I'm using icebreaker, which is killing shots against frozen enemies will make them explode. So I'm using my freeze ability skill, and then I'm also using bone shrapnel, so I'm dealing 100k to everything around these enemies. That's the weapon. You just want a good god roll weapon, and you want it to be a tactical assault rifle. The gear can be anything you want. We don't have any legendaries or anything like that. This class you can just use purples. On your gear you're going to want to try and get bonus firepower, cooldown reduction, close range damage, or long range damage. That's pretty much all you want on your stuff. So for the headgear, we have our attributes, so our bonus firepower, cooldown reduction, close range damage. And we have the tier 3 Sharp Eye, which means killing enemies while aiming down sights grants you more firepower. So that's just going to mean we deal more damage. You get that from Sergio's beret. I got very lucky to get one. And then our second modifier is just anything. It was just sort of a throwaway, because you don't need to maximise on this. For our chest piece, we have the same modifiers, the bonus firepower, long range, close range. And then you want to use no pain, no gain. So when the skill ends, 40% of damage dealt by the skill is turned into healing and spread equally among allies. So it's just healing you and your allies when the skill ends. But with this build, our blighted rounds shouldn't end, or will rarely end. You probably have to end it once or twice in a game, in an expedition. You're going to want to use toxic lead as well. Killing enemies afflicted with toxic will instantly replenish 40% of the ammo in your magazine. So when we kill someone with the blighted rounds, we're going to get 40% of that ammo off the total ammo back. Which means we're going to constantly be killing stuff, having a full mag back, and we will keep our blighted rounds for as long as possible. For our legs, we have the same modifiers, but we have spare mag. We have the same attributes, but we have different modifiers. So we have spare mag, which means our blighted rounds is effective for one more magazine. So we have 2 magazines worth of blighted rounds to use. So if one accidentally runs out, we have another one spare. And the second modifier for this is just something random. I want to get better leg gear, one which will actually, for a modifier that will actually help, but one isn't massively needed. The mods you want to use for this build is just everything to do with blighted rounds. For our gloves, we have the same attributes, bonus firepower, cooldown, and long range. And then we have trick up the sleeve, which is while the skill is active, killing shots grant you 30% extra bullets in your mag. So as well as the 40% from toxic lead, we're also getting 30% from trick up the sleeve. So every time we kill something, we are getting 70% of our bullets back into our magazine, which is perfect because we just want to keep blighted rounds for as long as possible. We also have Radical Therapy, which is deal 15% more damage against enemies afflicted by toxic, and every enemy we shoot or kill will definitely be afflicted by toxic, or most probably. Especially if we're using our blighted rounds, we're doing 15% more damage. With our boots, I've gone for max health, long range damage, and healing received. My boots, I need to get a god roll on, but I haven't yet, so I've just gone for max health on them, just for a bit more survivability. And we also have the long range damage, which is why I've used them as well. But for this, I'm using critical analysis, which is blighted rounds increase critical damage by 15%. So when we are using blighted rounds and hitting crits, we're doing so much more damage. This build is insane. At tier, using a level 44 gun, we are hitting 70, 80k per headshot. And we're using a burst weapon, so per burst we're doing about 200,000 a burst. And that's only for a level 44 weapon. Other modifiers you can use, so this isn't a perfect build, but it's really powerful and really good. The only things you can use modifier wise is entirely up to you, but you want to use everything you can for your blighted rounds skill, and you need to use toxic lead and radical therapy. Those are all the must. The rest are entirely up to you. You can go for survivability ones or just more damage ones and just be an absolute glass cannon using this build.
probably try to wait them out, so they'd starve and eat each other. But the pod security. Good one.
The last thing is, how do we use this build? So this build, at the very start of the expedition, we are going to pop our Blighted rounds. So we have 2 magazines of this, and we will replenish those bullets. Throughout the expedition, we are constantly going to throw our turret every 10 seconds roughly, so then we get that additional 40% damage. Now, throughout the expedition, you should be able to have, or you can have your Blighted rounds throughout the whole thing. But if they do go down, just keep using your turret and sort of play safe until they're back up. And when they're back up, you can go all out. I use Cold Snap as my third ability, or skill, because when the melee attackers come, it can be a bit hard to hit them. So I simply just pop that whenever there's a big group, or I've got melee attackers coming for me, or just any sort of hazard. Cold Snap is our sort of safety feature. That's how you play it.